The survival game genre is one that has been ploughed thoroughly over the last few years, with hugely popular titles like The Forest, Subnautica, Don't Starve, Grounded, and plenty more lighting up the bestsellers charts. There's something that players just find so compelling about being stranded in an often very hostile environment, forced to fend for themselves and regularly hunker down to survive the elements and enemies that will come to get you. Windbound takes some of the most fundamental elements of this genre and blends it into an ever-changing environment. You see, instead of setting down roots, founding a new base, and then regularly venturing out from this fixed point, you actually take your base with you from island to island. Your base, if you hadn't already guessed, is a boat. The game starts with Kara finding herself shipwrecked by a heavy storm, seemingly also at the hands of a gigantic Nautilus sea monster. Thankfully, that's not the end for her. This would be a very, very short game if it was, and she then wakes up on a frankly idyllic little island with nothing to hand but her trusty little knife. Exploring this new small patch of land, it's not long before you find the ore of the ancestors atop an unusual rock formation. This ore responds to Kara's touch and the necklace that she wears, letting you then set sail once more and start to reveal more of the game's story as you explore. Travelling by boat makes for an intriguing change of pace, starting off with a simple canoe made out of grass and then expanding it to have multiple pontoons, decking, a sail, and everything that you might need to be able to gather from each island that you visit and craft new gear to prepare you for the next. In truth, we only got to scratch the surface of what's possible here, our playtime giving us a relatively short window to see the game's opening moments and then jumping ahead a few chapters to see how the boat can evolve and the different environments you can encounter. By the fourth chapter, you should easily have 2 or 3 hulls strapped together with a basic platform on it, as well as a fire that you can stoke to cook food and a pot with which you can concoct potions. Regardless of the size of your boat though, it is a wonderful feeling as you sail between the islands. The camera starts to feel that little bit more dynamic, the sounds become more evocative of crossing the open waters, and there's a real The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker vibe to the game, thanks in part to the stylistic visuals. It's nowhere near as toon-like as Wind Waker, perhaps coming by way of Breath of the Wild instead, but there is certainly some common ground to be found. The music that accompanies this is lovely, injecting playfulness, tension, drama, and majesty as and when they are each required. The light and joyful plucked strings as you chase after little wild pigs on the first island make way for the groaning didgeridoo-like sounds as you come across that strange and unnatural rock formation. The up-tempo drums that thump as you fight territorial animals then switch to sweeping pianos and strings when you take to the seas and head over to a new landmass. The only thing that I feel is kind of missing at times is the actual sound of the ocean waves crashing against the shore, and I'd love for this to be far more present in the game's audio than it actually is. It would just be able to give this really pleasant, calming backdrop to all of the other game's sounds. Though the game is procedurally generated, the opening chain of small islands are more tightly constrained to help ease players into the adventure. The grass here is vibrantly green, there's adorable little wild pigs running around, as I already mentioned. You can obviously hunt and kill them for meat if you really want to, and there is little danger to be found as you get your fingers and thumbs around the basic controls and menus. There is a little bit of awkwardness to be found in these early interactions, in my opinion. Inventory management is always a tricky thing to design, and while it is simple enough to bring up the inventory and the crafting screen alongside it, I always felt that I was looking at the wrong part of the screen when I did so, expecting something to be in the foreground when it was actually in the background, and continually tapping the shoulder button just as I flipped back and forth to try and get my place in the screen. It's not helped by the crafting menu then also being subdivided into pages that you flip through instead of being a single large scrollable list. I'm sure there's a reason for that later into the game to help divide things up into categories, but it feels a bit too obtuse early on. You start off with an inventory that is just the wrong side of being a bit too small, but this can be expanded in a couple of ways. First, you'll likely find the materials needed to craft a simple storage unit to strap onto the front of your canoe, but this gives you a hilariously small new storage pool, literally just 3 slots in that first form. Later upgrades can then switch that from grass and leaves to using bamboo and wood, giving you sturdier materials for your boat, which you might need if and when pesky little crabs hop on and start chomping away, and also offering better and more advanced upgrades. You've also then got the ability to craft bags, which will obviously let you carry more stuff anyway. As you venture into each chapter's new map, you will be charting the unknown, trying to pick out what might be an island from the thick clouds that always seem to line the horizon. There's some great potential here for varied biomes. We got to see a big shift from those serene patches of the vibrantly coloured lands from the start of the game as we sailed to an imposing, murky island that was surrounded almost entirely by rocks. I literally had to go what felt like the entire way around the island to find a spot where I could land. If this swampy atmosphere didn't already scream danger, then the giant frog and the explosive toxic plants surely did. In truth, danger seems to be only there when you really go looking for it. You'll need to hunt animals in order to take their bones, hides and meats and craft them into new tools or just food to keep you surviving, but they're not defenseless. Whether it's a wild boar, a pair of rhino-like beasts or gigantic frogs, you'll need a deft touch to be able to dodge their attacks and then turn around and strike back. It's not the most challenging experience from what we saw, and the combat controls feel pretty intuitive, whether it's a knife, spear, slingshot or bow and arrow, but get your timing wrong and you will take some hooves to the face a few times too many. If you're not looking for a fight though, at that particular point in time, then it's pretty easy to just run away. The survival genre brings with it a bit of a reputation, with many of the most popular examples making a name for themselves as they go through early access. And that naturally brings with it more than a few rough edges, as typically smaller indie devs have to manage the tricky balancing act of fixing bugs, adding new content, and managing their newfound audience. Windbound neatly skirts around that problem, firstly by having a nice tidy publishing deal with Koch Media, and also by then releasing in a finished form, which is a pretty novel concept. From the small amount of time that we spent with the game, it certainly seems well put together, and we hope that this is true of the final game when it releases later this month. So, with a gorgeous art style, wonderful atmosphere, and an intriguing take on the survival game genre, Windbound is absolutely one to keep an eye on when it comes to Xbox One, PlayStation 4, Switch, PC, and Stadia on the 28th of August. Thanks as ever for checking out our videos. I hope you've enjoyed it and like the look of what you saw in the background. Make sure to keep an eye out on thesixthaxis.com. We will be gearing up to have a review of this game around about the time of launch, that is for sure. Until then though, make sure to like, subscribe, share, click that silly little bell icon, and hopefully we will see you again soon. Goodbye!